3 days after Super Typhoon Yolanda hit the Philippines, it has left many provinces in the Visayan region paralyzed, especially Leyte, Samar, Capiz, and Occidental Mindoro. With thousands feared dead and hundreds more homeless, Typhoon Yolanda has become one of the worst tragedies in recent history. In the midst of this tragedy, chaos ensued with cases of looting and robberies stemming from desperation as victims of Yolanda wait for help from government agencies and aid. Earlier today, the city of Tacloban was declared under a state of emergency. Telecoms, electricity, and water supply are just starting to come back into service in some areas. While donations are aplenty, getting them to the affected areas has been difficult, with airports also destroyed by the super typhoon. Aside from donating, what other forms of help can concerned citizens provide to the victims of Yolanda? How can people check the status of their relatives residing in the affected areas? In cases of looting, what are the legal repercussions and should there be, given the present situation of the provinces? Good evening. You are watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News channel. I am Attorney Karen Jimeno. Tonight, we will be focusing on helping our fellow countrymen who are victims of Typhoon Yolanda.
I'm Attorney Nepomuceno. Solar News channel is accepting donations in kind and in cash. You can check out the details on your screen.
To help us know more about the devastation caused by Typhoon Yolanda, we have with us tonight Ms. Malu Felizar-Cagay, Executive Director of the Center for Disaster Preparedness. Good evening, and thank you for being with us, Ms. Malu.
Good evening.
Good evening, Malu. Yeah.
Good evening.
Well, tonight of course, our show is Legal Help Desk, but I think we're going to emphasize more on the help desk part. Because, but of course,
it's really very devastating.
Yeah,
what
it is.
Happened.
It's quite gut-wrenching to
yes,
watch.
And since you're the Executive Director for Disaster Preparedness, did you expect this kind of devastation? This is at least the 30th typhoon, right, that has hit the country this year.
Yes.
So we're used to typhoons, but the scale of devastation this time is really, I think, historical.
Yeah.
Do you think we could have prepared better for this?
Yeah, actually, it's very difficult to prepare for a super typhoon, and it's the first time in the world that we have this kind of strong typhoon or super typhoon. So I think it's even beyond the level of preparedness of our LGUs and even at the community level, because it's so huge and a lot of impact, and actually people evacuated, but because I think we were not able to really foresee the big impact of a super typhoon
and the speed,
and the speed. Though our DOST of Pag-asa, they provided actually a very good forecast for us.
Yeah.
But then I think because we are not used to that kind of strong typhoon.
I mean, we're used to typhoons, but not that strong.
Yeah.
But, sorry, Ms. Malu, before the typhoon arrived, there were already reports that this was going to be the strongest typhoon ever recorded. And do you think there was any shortcoming on the part of either LGUs, government agencies, in preparing the provinces that were going to be hit?
Yeah, actually, if you look at the DILG, because DILG, or the Interior of Local and Government, is actually the one responsible for the disaster preparedness. And I think when it comes to the law and even a requirement for the local government to prepare for any disaster, they are actually required to come up with the disaster risk reduction and management plan, and very specific on a very specific hazard for the contingency plan, and that we need actually a very clear scenario, a very specific scenario. And when it comes to the contingency plan, we are actually preparing for the worst case scenario. And I think that's actually one area that really needs to improve by our local government and even the national government, because if we have a very good risk assessment and scenario, clear scenario of what will happen, we actually have the estimate of what will gonna happen, the impact to the people, the impact to the basic social services, the impact to communication. And if we have that kind of scenario and a very clear risk assessment of a certain area, I think, and we really believe that we can respond to it accordingly. Because if the communication actually just collapse, so what is our alternative? No, if it is very clear that the possibility of collapse of communication
is down.
yeah, I think we need to be very prepared on that, because how many days now, how many hours that we don't have contact even with Secretary Gasmin and Secretary Rojas, and actually communication is really a big problem in this in this incident or in this event.
Not a lot of people know this, but in 2010, a Republic Act was passed. Now, this is the Philippine National Disaster Reduction
and Management.
Risk Reduction and Management. Under this law, what are the provisions which would have triggered, or I guess, what is the process that this law provides that would allow the local governments to be more prepared? For example, in cases of, let's say, declaration of state of calamity, what triggers this, and what really happens from a legalistic standpoint? Funds are released. Can you give us a little bit of an explanation on what this RA is all about, and how it could have helped, or how it is helping currently?
Yeah,
the
actually,
situation?
the Republic Act 10121, or the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act, actually now it's a proactive law, because in the past, when we still had we're still implemented the PD 1566, that we can only utilize the 5% calamity fund after declaring a state of calamity. So it's very reactive. But now, with the present law that we had, we can actually utilize the 70% of the ERA, at least 5% from the ERA of the local government. The 70% of that can be utilized for preparedness and mitigation and recovery. And then the 30% can be utilized after declaring a state of calamity of a certain area. So even at the barangay level, municipal level, they can declare if it's actually the impact of any disaster is beyond the capacity of the community to respond.
And now I'm going to ask you a question as someone who works on disaster relief preparedness. For those who are now back dun sa mga affected areas, how can they deal with the current situation? Yung mga hindi yung nasiraan ng houses, those who have do not have sufficient goods or food in stock, what can they do to deal with the current situation?
Yeah. Ang magandang tignan ngayon is how deal with the present situation. If we look at the preparedness, actually each local government is actually required to come up with the local early warning system. So we need to warn the people, and then we need to identify the evacuation centers for the people to evacuate when there is a disaster. But I think with this Typhoon Yolanda, people evacuated, but when they moved to a safer place, storm surge came. So I think one of the lessons here is we also need to deal with the several disasters happening at one time. So there's a strong wind, and then there is also storm surge. So one of the scenario that I think we actually not able to consider is the scenario of a storm surge, because I think we are, though the strength of the wind is really strong, and that's more than 240 kph. So, and then the scenario of storm surge, I think
people were familiar with storm surge. I think people know what a tsunami is, but I don't think people were quite. Even me, I wasn't familiar. What is a storm surge? What is a storm surge? What is it? What happens?
Actually.
So,
of course, from
now I know.
Yeah, now you know.
Now I know what it is. It's like a tsunami.
Yeah, it's like a tsunami, but different. So the triggering for tsunami is actually earthquake, but this one is a strong wind. The water in the ocean actually being pushed to the seashore, and also the rainwater also. It's.
Yeah.
So if you're in the evacuation centers, you find yourself in trouble kasi nagkaroon pa ng storm surge afterwards, and you don't have enough food to eat anymore. Kasi I've been reading some either reports, may iba pa nga nagpapadala direct messages sa atin dito sa Legal HD saying na yung wala silang natatanggap na relief goods. So for those in the affected areas na walang natatanggap, what can they do at the moment to survive?
Yeah, at the moment, itong disaster na to medyo mahirap kasi even the stockpile of the local government is also affected and being damaged. So even probably the warehouse, because even the municipal hall is also damaged, and even the houses of the
In other words,
business community.
Even Plan B was ruined.
Yeah.
There was Plan A was ruined and Plan B was ruined.
Yeah. So, but then, like what I'm saying is, if we are really, prepared for that, and we were able to consider the possible impact, but then I think even the logistics now of our government is even beyond, because how many provinces, damaged on this, and how many C-130 do we have in the country? How many helicopter do we have? So even the incident command system of the government, I think will really have a hard time to do this. So it's really very difficult for the people to go, because even the area is not even accessible. So even if you want to bring some food for the community, it's very difficult to, because of the problem of accessibility. So one of the basic and crucial actually is how to clear up to make the area accessible to the service providers. So I think the only transportation now is C-130 and helicopter to reach the area. So it's really difficult to handle then. So that's why maybe, it's how many days now that the people don't have food, People, there are dead bodies, and, they cannot even bring their dead bodies to the funeral home because it's also devastated. So
Okay, so we'll ask you more questions on, hopefully the information can help those with families or who want to reach out to the victims of Yolanda. We'll take a short break. Legal Help Desk will return after these messages. We would also like to announce that To Go is offering free shipping of relief goods and donations. Just go to any To Go office. You are still watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel.
Now joining us via phone patch tonight is Councilor Cristina Gonzalez Romualdez, City Councilor of Tacloban City. Ma'am Cristina, good evening.
Yes, good evening. Yes, good
this
evening.
is Attorney Rod Nepomuceno.
Hi,
And I'm
Good
Attorney
morning.
Karen Jimeno. Thank you so much for giving us time.
Yes.
Yes.
First of all, you had the first-hand experience of what it was like in Tacloban, and you just arrived last night. We had a quick chat
Yes.
earlier. Can you give us the situation now? Is it under the state of calamity? Is it, and generally, are things improving at the moment?
Yes, definitely. Right now, everything is under control. I had to come in here to bring my two daughters here, and at the same time also to maybe to answer some queries, or maybe to also to clarify some of the stories that were coming out about us.
Yeah.
So I'm here, and everything is under control. Like the national government had added more police. So they added like maybe 500 to the PNP police force, and then I heard the U.S. military just arrived today as well.
Yes, I've
So-
heard that the U.S. has sent the Marines, right?
Yes, the Marines. So we're happy about that, because definitely peace and order is very important. So, yeah.
Now, currently, is it if the people are confused as to who to heed or who to follow? do they follow the LGUs? I mean, the police,
Oh,
or is it the
definitely they follow the LGU, of course.
yeah?
Yes.
So the LGU
Yes.
police is in place already.
Yes,
The
of
police
course.
force.
And
All
even
right.
the mayor himself, my husband himself, is out every day with the people. Even when I was there before I came back to Manila, we were out every day, with talking to the people in the streets, walking, because there's really no other. It's really hard to get around with a vehicle. It's easier to get around on foot. So we do that, most of the time, going around the city, especially most of the areas actually are, all practically devastated. So we would go around and, check what was happening, talk to the people, and they felt more secure when they'd see my husband or myself there, and talagang walang iwanan, kumbaga, with them.
Councilor Cristina, I'm curious if the people of Tacloban are receiving relief goods and help. Are they getting enough assistance?
Actually, there's more than enough.
Oh,
There's more than enough. I feel that the first day when it happened, everything was on a standstill, because actually, I'd say almost 100% of the city was affected. So even the people in the government agencies, even the people, the police force, everybody, the DSWD, everybody was the same. We were affected ourselves. So there's really nobody, to go out there and help and right away give medical attention right there and then, or, give rice and all that, food. So that day was like, people were looking for their loved ones who were missing. People were trying to get themselves together and, and all that. So people started panicking, and where stores, of course, everything was closed because everything got flooded, and they were looking for where they could buy food. So it didn't start as if they wanted to go and loot. So in the beginning it's just out of a survival instinct of like maybe a family who want to make sure that they have the basic needs, like first of all food and water. So that's how it started. And cause I'd talk to them on the street and I'd see them, and
So
they're not violent, or they don't
Yeah, for a
they're
while.
not gonna do any harm to you. They just wanted to, most of them. But then I guess there are some others from maybe from other towns, who knows, but people that want to take advantage of the situation, and they come in and they start the looting, and they just loot anything. But it's not the majority of the people, or that's not the intention of the majority of the population.
Now, Councilor Cristina, there were stories a couple of days ago where there was a Red Cross truck carrying all of these goods and relief goods, and I think Red Cross Chairman Dick Warden was saying that they were mobbed or they were stopped by a I don't know if there were lawless elements, and effectively
Actually,
they just
of course,
just gave it away.
Definitely, there are lawless elements, and there are these groups that are taking advantage of the situation.
But generally
that's
everything's
what's happening, I feel, yeah.
But generally Tacloban is already passable. San Juanico is already
Someone
clear,
is
and
possible, yeah.
everything is possible. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The airport, the first day I was there, we live near the airport, 2 minutes from the airport, and
All right.
we had to walk through the debris. That's how it was. But on that day itself, in the afternoon, my husband himself, because the driver of the backhoe was not available, so he himself had to drive the vehicle to remove the debris. So that day, and then the next morning, it was already passable.
All right.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience with
Yeah.
us. And we're very happy that you're safe, you and your family are safe. And of course,
That's the most
relieved
important
to
that we're safe. Yeah,
Yes.
that's the most important.
yes, and we're relieved to know that there's at least enough relief goods sufficient
Yes.
going to Tacloban right now.
Yeah,
Wish you all the best.
We're very overwhelmed, and everyone from Tacloban is very thankful for that spirit of sharing, or the bayanihan spirit ng mga Pilipino, that you see that all the love pouring out from everyone, not only in the Philippines but from all over the world, who are have the heart to help and share, and talagang it's really heartwarming, and it makes me cry. It makes me want to cry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
And
Thank
we
you,
wish you
Councilor
good luck
Cristina.
and God bless.
Okay. Well, wow, quite interesting. I
Yeah.
did have a chance to chat to their
Yes, but you
earlier.
mentioned to me earlier that you were chatting with
Yeah, with
Christina earlier, and pati yung bahay nila got
yeah, it's
destroyed. And,
what was left of their house is just basically the frame and the walls. She and her family were the water surge really literally went up to their roof. Their roof came off, and their ceiling was parang just shaking and waving like that.
yes.
And they were hanging on beams. Her 10-year-old was on top of a beam, basically the skeleton structure of their home.
Yes.
So she went through. She has a very nice home, a good home in Tacloban. But what she had to go through. So can you imagine?
Can you imagine the other people?
Correct.
No?
Right.
We have also via phone patch right now is Attorney Harry Roque.
Oh, a
and
good
he's
friend.
the chairperson for the Center for International Law and an associate professor at UP College of Law. Good evening, Attorney Roque.
Good evening, Panyera, and good evening to all your televiewers.
Good evening.
Thank
Good
you
evening,
for joining
attorney.
us. Attorney Roque, I don't know if you've read the news and parang may confusion, no? Sa Tacloban, what was really declared? Is it a state of emergency or a temporary state of martial law?
Well, I'm not sure if anything has been declared. No? What I do know is yesterday there was a suggestion to declare martial law, and I think the president rightfully rejected that suggestion. No? Because what we have in Tacloban right now may be an instance of police violence. No? But under the Constitution, it's very clear that the president can only suspend the privilege of the writ and declare martial law in case of invasion or rebellion. No? Now, what these powers are referred to sometimes as the extraordinary powers of the president as commander-in-chief. No? They're provided in a hierarchy in the Constitution itself, and they must be exercised pursuant to the hierarchy, with the least invasive being the calling out powers. Now, in my opinion, I think what the president did was to exercise the calling out powers. He called on the armed forces to restore law and order in Tacloban, and that, in my mind, is sufficient. No? Mm-hmm. This is without prejudice, of course, to the Congress also authorizing the president by law to exercise extraordinary powers, which Congress can declare may be exercised in times of emergencies. No? But that power to be exercised by Congress.
What are the legal, Attorney Roque? What are the legal repercussions once a city has been declared under a state of emergency or calamity? What are the legal repercussions for that, and how will it benefit the people of Tacloban, for example?
Well, I think by exercising the calling out powers, by calling on the armed forces to deal with lawless violence, there's a recognition that there is a breakdown as far as law and order is concerned in the city. And this is, of course, pursuant to human experience that in cases of catastrophes where there is a gap between the time when people have certain needs to be met and the delivery of humanitarian assistance, there's bound to be resort to lawless acts such as looting. But despite the fact that there will be temporary breakdown in these situations, the calling out powers or the decision of the president to send in the armed forces is, of course, an exception to the general rule that where there is no armed conflict, then it is civilian authorities that should be supreme in any area. Now, normally, it should be the Philippine National Police restoring peace and order in the city, but the calling out powers is a recognition that the Philippine National Police may not be in a position by itself to deal with acts of lawless violence. So the significance is recognition that not all is well, that in fact the powers of the armed forces may be required to restore peace and order.
Okay, but in terms of getting relief goods or more funding from the government, does declaring a state of calamity or emergency benefit a city or a province?
Oh, definitely. No, in the local government code, if I'm not mistaken, the declaration of calamity is authority to spend the local government's provision for calamities. Each local government, of course, has calamity funds. It's provided in the budget. And normally you would have authorizations to spend it. But the declaration of a state of calamity does away with the need for all this prior authorization. And it gives local officials now the power to spend them depending on what the needs are of the local community.
Yeah, Attorney Roque, of course we have the situation of looting now. We saw it in the video, and obviously, although this might be the last thing in their minds, but those who were, let's say, caught in video looting, and they weren't looting food or water, they were looting like television sets and toy guns or whatever. Are there any legal repercussions to that? Can legal action be filed against them? I mean, hypothetically, I don't think they will, but can they be held liable later on? You know, if they're caught like that, blatantly taking stuff from the department store?
Well, the happening of an emergency or a calamity cannot give a pretense for committing criminal acts. No?
Right.
The lootings are criminal in nature. If there is use of force upon persons or upon things to gain entry, then it becomes robbery. No? So these are ordinary cases of robbery where there is force used to gain entry, or theft, no, when there is no force employed against a thing or a person. No? But I repeat, under no circumstance the natural calamity results in the suspension of our criminal laws.
Yes.
They're always effective, and people should be investigated and prosecuted for this looting.
Yes. Attorney Roque, earlier, Councilor Cristina Gonzalez Romualdez, she actually shared that some of the people involved in the looting were getting naman basic commodities in order to survive. That is not an exception. Tama po ba?
That's still not an exempting circumstance. So under a revised penal code, you know, the exempting circumstance includes, you know, being insane, being a minor, or in certain circumstances, no, part of a married couple, and the husband finds the partner in a compromising act. In which case, it's not even exempting. There's a penalty discount. The calamity is not an exempting act. In fact, the challenge is how to uphold the rule of law even in times of natural calamity. Perhaps we will do it in a manner that is humane, understanding. Some of them probably should not be prosecuted for a kilo or two of rice, but technically speaking, all those who breach our penal law should be investigated and punished. Otherwise, people might think they can get away with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's all right.
So lesson learned. Don't loot even if really kailangan mo ng basic
I
commodities.
mean, the general sentiment is that you kind of feel for them, you kind of understand it, but it's
Bawal.
at the end of the day, it's still
Magnanakaw pa rin
still
yan.
not enough.
Thank you, Attorney Roque, for your insights. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much,
Thank you very
Attorney
much.
Roque.
Good evening. My privilege.
All right. All right. So, that's
You know, one thing I wanted to add sana, yung siguro for those who have yung mga affected families out there, or kung sino man yung mga affected, one thing they can explore is the SSS, di ba? Meron tayong tinatawag na calamity loans.
Right.
So
And they can probably...
they can inquire with the SSS
As long as there's an
if
SSS
they can
office.
qualify. Oo.
Kung okay yung SSS office doon, no? But I could understand,
I'm sure they are.
I can understand certain, I mean, some of the people there who probably don't know what to know. I think the important thing is to get information first, get information where to get the food and clean water. I think that first and foremost, rather than just go to the first store and loot that. No? So, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for tonight. We would like to thank all our guests for being with us tonight and trying to help our fellow Filipinos in this very trying time. I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. If you want to make a donation in kind or money, you can do so through the Solar News channel's One Small Act. We will be flashing in your screens the contact numbers, addresses, and bank account numbers at the end of the program. Join us again next Monday as we discuss your legal rights. Good night.